the IRS has just come out and reaffirmed that they are going to be going ahead with this new change to the tax threshold. It's absolutely crazy. Previously, it was $20,000 per year that you had to do a tax return on. Now they're bringing that threshold down right to $600. Yes, this is serious. This is not a joke. And this comes into force 1 month from today. It's not like you've got a year to, plan this and start looking into it. No, a month from today. And there's a lot of reports that many people will just instantly assume this is a mistake. Why would it go from $20,000 down to $600 just like that? And they will actually throw away these 1099 forms. I was actually looking into these 1099 forms, and I'll show you on the screen share very shortly just how many of them there are. There are 20 different forms. So if it wasn't complicated enough for people, depending on what it is that you're doing to earn money, and a lot of people that earn side hustle money, this is going to be an absolute nightmare. And it's ironic because the whole point of the current administration launching this was to stop tax avoidance, to raise tax revenue, and all these other things. But they said it was to stop tax avoidance with big business. Well, think about that for a second. Does that make any sense at all logically? Big business, they'll be doing a tax return reporting anyway. 20,000 is probably one transaction to some of these big guys. So I think it's complete nonsense. I think they're just deliberately targeting the poorest in society, a lot of people that might do lower income work, middle class as well, middle class people that might do something on the side. I know a lot of people do things like eBay or Etsy or, crafting or all sorts of other side hustles. Well, now it's been reported that all of these third-party apps have actually been tracking all of this and sending these reports to the government. Yes, no surprise there. And I wanted to read out some of the comments from the general public as to what they think about this. Then we're going to go to the shared screen and go through a lot of the data here. Someone commented, if I spend that money to buy a car or shoes or groceries, I pay sales tax on top once again. How many times should they be allowed to tax the same money? Well, let me just answer that question real quick. The reason the government are doing this is something called money velocity, or you may know it as the velocity of money. So each time that money comes into your hand and you spend it, guess what? The government taxes it every single time. You get the money, you go to the supermarket, you spend it, it gets taxed. You pay tax on it as a salary or however you earn your money. The supermarket pays the employee. There's a tax there, it goes to the government. So it keeps going round. That's what money velocity is all about. You see this tax every single time it goes round. So is it any surprise now that the government is claiming this is going to plug this debt hole and they're going to start taxing people at $600? Not really. Another comment said they are basically trying to make it impossible to have a small business or a side hustle. I think this is an assault on the middle class and small business, especially since it was touted as going after big business, but it obviously affects the small business and individual people. And then the last comment was quite interesting, which was, well, when the CBDC comes in, this is all going to be irrelevant anyway, because what's going to happen, the government is going to tax you at source. So when you have your digital wallet with the government, forget about commercial banks and everything else, because eventually they'll be phased out. It'll just be you and the government with your digital wallet. They will tax you at source, and then it's up to you to reclaim that tax money. These are the things that are coming, ladies and gentlemen. So here was the CNBC article on this. IRS warns taxpayers about new $600 threshold for third-party payment reporting. This is quite an interesting article, actually. But let me just show you the key points I've highlighted here. Before 2022, the federal Form 1099-K reporting threshold was for taxpayers with more than 200 transactions worth an aggregate above $20,000. However, Congress slashed the limit as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Who exactly is being rescued? That is my question. And a single transaction over $600 may now trigger the form. Now, let me just show you how many of these forms there are. 1099, you've got this one, INT, DIV, G, R, B, S, miscellaneous, NEC. I mean, this is going to be an absolute nightmare for the average person. The whole point and why people do these side hustles and things like that in the first place is so that they don't have to deal with this enormous headache of filling in all these forms. For some people, and now I know many of you will fill it in yourself and you're probably quite familiar with it, but for some people that just are not good at tax and not good at these forms, it is going to cause them a huge amount of stress on top of all of the stress that we already have with inflation and all of these other issues going into a recession, unemployment rate rising most likely next year, which I think it will do. This is not going to help people. This isn't going to improve productivity. This is going to reduce productivity because so many people and companies and now accountants and everyone else, and of course at the IRS, everyone's going to have to start taking more time to fill in all of these forms and reporting. It is going to be an absolute admin nightmare. The other thing I thought was absolutely ridiculous about this plan is that they are aiming at closing the tax gap, a top priority of the Biden administration. The provision is estimated to bring in $8.4 billion from fiscal year 2021 to 2031. Now, let me just put this into context for you. That's a 10-year period, okay? Let's just look at, this website here is the USA debt clock, okay? So we're just gonna zoom in on, not the debt because that's 31.3 trillion, but let's just focus on the US federal budget deficit, which is more closely related to what we're discussing here. So let's just see this again, $8.4 billion. Well, the budget deficit is $1,076 billion. So if they bring that down by $8 billion, you're going to go from $1,076 billion down to $1,068 billion. That is just an absolute drop in the ocean when you put this into context. It's absolutely nothing. So that makes me think, hold on, is there something else going on here? And I think it probably is. It's probably to do with this central bank digital currency, but more on that later. The challenge with the new lower threshold amount of $600 for Form 1099-K is that personal payments and reimbursements could be incorrectly reported as taxable transactions. Absolutely. Even Forbes have done an article about this, and they're saying how the IRS likes all of these different forms. For example, you probably get a 1099 form for every bank account, even if you only earn $10 of interest. Again, what a nightmare. Self-employment tax can add a whopping 15.3% on top of income taxes. That 15.3% applies up to the wage base of $147,000 with 2.9% tax on any excess over $147,000. And I saw this tweet, which I thought was quite ironic, from Libertarian Party of Ohio. The IRS wants to monitor how you spend $600 when it reportedly cost the US Navy $25,000 just to turn an aircraft carrier. Now, for those of you who say, well, I'm just not going to fill it in, I'm just not going to do it. Well, take a look at this. These are the charges. Up to 30 days late, $50 or $50. 31 days late, $110. If you don't file it after the 1st of August, $290. And if you intentionally disregard it, that $600 that we're talking about that you have to report on could cost you $580. Now, if you still don't believe that they're putting the squeeze on you at this point, I really don't know what else I can say and talk into this, but I do think this is all about the central bank digital currency. When you sit there and you look at these things and really apply logic and critical thinking, as I always do every single day, I take a lot of time for thinking, it's quite clear to me what's going on here. This is all in preparation for this CBDC launch, where, as I've said before multiple times, this will create digital slavery for everyone. All of us will all be in the same boat. And I know there's lots of arguments around, well, I'm going to transact with gold and silver and cryptocurrency and all these other things, which is great, and I own all these things as well. It's a very novel concept and I hope it works. But That's why they've got this digital ID that's going to track everything about you. They already have most of this information anyway, and all the data collection. That's how all of this fits together. There really isn't going to be much of an escape unless you go to some sort of small island or you're part of a community that's completely self-sufficient. There really isn't much escape away from all of this. And now we kind of know why the IRS says its 87,000 new hires could help collect as much as $1 trillion by forcing tax cheats to pay up. So again, they can't even get their numbers straight. At one point they're saying it's 8.4 billion. Now they're saying on this article it's going to be $1 trillion. Well, no, all you're going to do is create resentment with good, honest, hardworking people. Because if you think of how much we're talking about here, this $600 upwards, this is a drop in the ocean compared to these huge corporations that set themselves up in, let's say, tax havens. They don't pay the taxes anyway. See, what they could do is they could focus on these sort of areas and focus on these big companies, investigate these companies that are doing tax dodging and all these other scandals that we keep seeing all the time. The biggest industry for this is the banking sector, the financial sector. There are so many scandals and scams going on here that it would just blow your mind if you did all the research that I have to do on these things. It's mind-blowing. And yet, rather than going after the hundreds of billions here, they go after $600 with individuals. It just doesn't make any sense. Get ready, ultra-wealthy Americans. President Joe Biden wants you to start paying your share. Through the Inflation Reduction Act, Biden plans to increase funding for the IRS to help the agency catch sneaky tax evaders, especially those high earners who love to find loopholes around the law. Well, newsflash, you're not going to catch those people, because if there are loopholes, tax loopholes, they are going to be paying for the best accountants that money can buy, because they're wealthy, they're the elitists, they can afford these accountants. Guess what? Who can't afford these accountants? It's the middle class, it's the people doing gig work. They can't afford to pay these hourly rates of some of these best accountants so that they can reduce their tax liability. It just wouldn't be worth it. A Treasury Department report from May 21 estimates the extra money would allow the agency to hire around 87,000 new employees, which could include revenue agents and customer service and IT staff by 2031. Okay, now we're getting to the truth here. This makes sense. So what they're actually doing is they're getting you to pay for the IRS agents, who are then going to enforce these laws onto the people. Do you get what's going on here? They're getting you to pay for the trap that's going to trap you. I mean, this is so absurd and directly in your face, cheeky, that it's quite unbelievable, really. But just coming back to the crypto angle then, well, unless you've got some sort of privacy coins and you've got some sort of network set up there, a lot of these crypto platforms are already signed up to the government with the IRS and HMRC in the UK and all these other countries. They are going to actually give the information, your account information, to the government. So everybody's going to be caught out by this regardless. Now, let me just tell you the silver lining here and the one saving grace that may come in at the very last minute. And that is that this law, now that we've had a change of politics in the USA, this law may get stopped right at the last moment. And I think that could be quite likely to happen, because actually, even though they keep talking about this 87,000 IRS agents, they haven't even started hiring yet for the bulk of these agents. So I do think there's a strong possibility this could get reversed within, because you bear in mind, we've only got 1 month before this actually hits. I think it's possible that it could get reversed right at the last minute. I'd love for you to share your thoughts below in the comments here. What do you actually think is going to happen here? What do you think? I already shared some other comments that people have made, but what do you think is going to happen? What are your thoughts on, well, I'm going to pre-phrase this for you. These crazy policies is how I see them, but I'd love to know your thoughts on it. And just remember that I do have a finance course. You can find that in the description helps to understand this very complex world of macroeconomics, how everything works, and actually how to create wealth for yourself long term, not get rich quick, but get rich slow, I guess is the better term. All right, well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, God bless, and I will see you tomorrow.